There we go. We are live now. Live on
We are live.
YouTube. Live in our recording that'll be posted 4 days from now, but we're still live right now.
We are alive.
We are alive.
13 of 3.
Thir-
Number 13.
That's my favorite. Um, so we have we're a little bit different schedule this week because and that's part of the reason we're doing it today, but also some of the things we wanted to touch on today. Winter Strong is this week, so both of us will be making the pilgrimage to South Carolina to go do that. You're heading out, I think tomorrow. You said, right?
Yeah, they usually want us in a little bit early. I haven't gotten an exact detail on that, but yeah, the past years, been a day or two early.
Yeah,
Got a great team of people down there, obviously full time that are doing everything, but probably right after this show, going to talk to the guys and kind of sort out what my travel plans are, what my requirements are, and um, the last few years, I guess the first year was more what of a, we're just getting our feet wet, didn't know what to do. So it was kind of an all hands on deck.
yep.
And then every year, especially credit to Ricky Hartzog, he
Ricky's the
somewhat
man.
took over the planning and preparation, not entirely, but just someone that was a point man on it, and he's done a great job to the point that you know it's starting to have a system and a flow, and everybody's not necessarily always running around like their head,
Right.
with the chicken with their head
Just
cut
him,
off.
basically.
Well, just him in the last 48 hours.
Yeah,
That's the
right.
way every big event goes. Is it's like you have
Yeah,
a year and everybody's kicked back, and then the last 48 years, everybody seems like they're losing their shit. So,
right.
um, I do know that it's going to be eventful this year. And talking to people, it's going to be the biggest one so far. Numbers wise, I don't know. You never know what that brings.
Right. Right.
You bring 10 extra people and it's fine, and you bring in 100 extra people and it's chaos. So
Right.
never know what it will be. My hope for the event is that, like myself, it is an escape for me, but it's not about me. It's a little bigger than that.
Mm,
And I think, my objective opinion, I've looked at people that maybe somewhat thought it was more about them at the event, and that's okay too. But I really think at the heart of the matter, it is not about any one individual. It is about as a collective,
mm.
and really the representation of what the outdoors can be in a Sorinex vision.
Yeah.
And lots of education, lots of application and experiential stuff. All about it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
great, and I always leave more uplifted, I guess, uh, than I would expect. Because
Sure.
you always kind of expect to just get there and be overwhelmed with it, but it's going to be good, man. I'm excited about it. What are you looking forward to most about it?
Well, the thing that, and when I started going to, I can't say these kinds of things because Winter Strong is really the only one that's kind of like that, right? But
Sure.
just events in general. I remember, uh, like the first couple, it was like, how do I consume everything that happens over the course of the day or 2 days or 3 days or whatever it is, right? Like, and my brain is just melted because I'm trying to do everything and talk to everyone, and that kind of really makes it hard to appreciate certain aspects of what happens because
Yeah.
I'm trying to do too much,
Hmm.
right? And then I think it was probably, it might have even been the Summer Strong from 2 years ago,
Hmm.
uh, where that was like the first one where I went in. I'm like, look, there's, as far as speakers, like there's like three that I know I'm here to really pay attention to,
Sure.
right? So like that's going to be where I really hone in on, like if I'm taking notes or if I'm really engaged in what they're doing. And the other ones are great, but if somebody else conversation gets pulled away from something, or there's something that I really would like to be a part of and I end up missing one, look, I'm okay. Like I'm here to do a couple of things and meet some people and just hang out. And so I think with things like this, going in with not a plan, but like, look, there's a couple things I really want to make sure happen,
Hmm.
right? And I'm going to make sure those, that's kind of be kind of on the priority list. And last year, not knowing what even the weekend was, right? Like I
Right.
kind of did that the same thing last year. I show up and I'm like, I don't really know what's going on, so I like wander around and see how many different things I can be a part of for 2 days, And
Yeah.
then, but this year I kind of like I'm a little bit different where there's some people I'm really excited to see and hang out with that I haven't seen since last year, and like I'm putting a little bit more focus on some of that, like who are
Hmm.
who are the people I'm excited to like go see and just hang around with for a couple of days. And I know that some people that I haven't met yet, but I've been talking to them that are going to be there. Like that'll be the first time I've meeting them in person. And
Yep.
so things like that, like it's almost more oriented for me for this anyways. Like I want to go see my friends and meet people and just hang out. And then like the stuff that happens will be fun, but it's more about like the connection part of it for me, at least for this year. That's kind of
Yeah.
how I'm looking at it going into it.
Yeah, I think that's always important. And maybe one of the attributes of a Sorinex event, Summer Strong and Winter Strong, somewhat from the same ilk,
Yep.
definitely from the same genesis of what we're trying to build, which is a place that's welcoming, educational, application can be there. I've said that twice now, but
Yeah.
I do think that the nature of the events where it's a little more casual,
Yep.
you can kind of sit in for a minute and bounce around. And I think Winter Strong possibly more than Summer Strong. And I also think that's the numbers dynamic. Summer Strong, you're talking about
Much bigger.
1,000, 1,500 people. I don't know the
Yep.
exact numbers versus 200 to whatever it becomes this year. But in those smaller pockets, you tend to see more of that breakout conversation.
Yep.
5 or 6 people sitting around the fire. Maybe an educator is going through like somebody doing the bow drill, teaching that. Well, 5 or 6 people stay longer.
Yep.
5 or 6 people get frustrated and they walk off.
Yeah.
That's one of the cool things about it, in that it's not so binding that you have to do any one thing the whole time. It really is what you make of it. And I hope that most people go there and, like you said, they either meet people that they haven't met, they learn something they haven't learned, or they
Yep.
try something they never tried. But it felt like a little bit last year that I saw some people just kind of staying back the entire time,
Yeah.
not really doing anything. Like,
Right.
I'm the shit, I'm here, so come talk to me.
Right.
And that just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Not as an individual, I'm not going to classify what they do as right or wrong.
Right.
Just doesn't work for me. I don't want to go someplace and waste my time or waste anybody else's time, being half-assed about it. So,
Yeah.
I try to go pretty full immersion. A lot of times I was working the course last year while people were on it, making sure everybody was staying their path and whatnot. But I really think if you only go for like a masturbatory experience
Yeah.
or about yourself, you miss the
Hmm.
entire intent of the weekend. Like, there's so many great things to learn and experience and people. If you just, and this is not at you because of what you said, but if you
Yeah.
stick to the same 4 or 5 people the entire weekend,
Yep.
just stay home. Like,
Yep.
I just stay home. Like,
Yep. Totally.
you're missing the opportunity of a lifetime. So,
One
but
of the
yeah, I
cool
think,
things, oh, I was just gonna say one of the cool things from last year was because that was obviously Greg's first experience down
mm,
for the event too, and he and I were like a lot of maybe similar frame of mind, kind of in the overwhelm, like I don't even know where to go, kind of, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
so a couple of times throughout the weekend, like the two of us just kind of found each other
hmm,
wandering, and we'd walk together and talk, just the two of us, like wandering through the woods, like back towards the gun range and stuff like that. But we it was kind of unintentional, but we ended up doing it intentionally, where we wanted to find where were the like what event was happening where the least amount of people were, so
yeah,
we could like go. And I remember the two of us walked down, and I don't remember what was going on at the time. It might have been during Dudley's deal that
yeah,
day with all on the archery range. But we wandered over to the pistol stuff and hung out with Scott Volkortson for like
yeah,
an hour, and it was literally just the two of us there for almost the whole thing. So we like hung out with the two of them and shot his guns and just chatted with him and got to know him a little bit better, and it was awesome. And so like that was the kind of stuff that was really cool, where you see uh openings,
hmm,
and you get to go down and not only have that chance to talk with Scott, but me and Greg just wandering around for a couple of hours, like, oh, this look like nobody's over here, let's go do this, like what's going on over
yeah.
here.
Well, I
And
think
those are the kind of things that were really fun.
the thing I love about that, is Greg is the perfect type of candidate for something like Winter Strong, I believe, in that, he's obviously at the top of his game. He's a very, very intellectually driven person. He's a performance driven person. He's lived it, done it. But the scope of his exposure to a lot of these things has been limited to, we'll just say, like an inner city, or
Yep.
like you know, a cityscape. I won't say
Yeah.
necessarily just a city, but a cityscape type place, whether it was in California or New York or anything in between. So you take a guy, high level skill, high level attention, high level detail, and then you introduce them to a new world. Literally, the outdoors is a new
Yeah.
world. And just some of the stuff, getting to see him shoot a bow, watching some of his pistol work,
Hmm.
just seeing him, somebody that you might classify as, oh, they're not an outdoorsman, but in the event they started their path on becoming an outdoorsman. And I think that's, will his journey look like mine? Absolutely not. But does that mean he gets more enjoyment of being out there? Sure. And that I think, over speaking for Bert, but I think that is one of the main things that we were looking for here is to bring these coaches, bring these, athletically driven talent to the outdoors. Because, like for me, I'm a perfect example. Bert has done it himself. Bert was Olympic level athlete. I was a high level power lifter. We have a lot of military friends through the Sornex community.
Hmm.
All of these are uh, post focus, I should say. Like the outdoors has not always been my drive,
Yeah.
but having that attention span and having that ability to navigate a sport at a high level, that energy just doesn't go away. So when you leave your sport or you're forced out of the sport like I was, man, I was searching for something in the outdoors, whether it's hiking, camping, hunting, rafting, whatever it is. There's just so many options to what the
Hmm.
outdoors can be. That's where it excites me for the outdoor side. And I'm really grateful that Bert has allowed me to kind of focus on that end of the spectrum. I just hope that we can grow it and do more with it. I just think we have too many good people, too many
Yeah.
resources, um,
And
to just not.
the inverse of that is cool
Yeah,
too. Like the guys that are
yeah,
coming from the more the outdoors side of things that, their experience of training is just like, I'm going to throw a pack on and just go hike. Like maybe there's
yeah,
not a lot of formal weightlifting or any type of like strength training background, but they get to pull in with all of these guys that are like Olympic level, you know, in, in that world too. And so you
yeah.
get the inverse of that conversation, which is pretty fun too.
Something I thought was really cool about Woodski, when we were at TAC out in Park City, one of his presentations was, and I'm going to paraphrase it right now, but in the outdoor space or really in the men's culture, we have this like, you better be the toughest, you got to be the hardest, you got to be this, this, and this. And Woodski kind of framed it in a way that was, I think it was agitating in a sense, but it was also the truth if you were willing to listen. Is that toughness is a byproduct of failed preparation. You
Mm,
don't have to be tough for something that you're prepared for. So this endless mindset of the hunter that like I'm the toughest on the mountain, I'm this, and this, and this, and this, and it all comes down to toughness. Well, toughness really means you weren't prepared
mm,
because the first day of basketball conditioning, you get your ass killed, but you might
yeah,
survive it.
right.
But in the end of 8 or 10 weeks, it's kind of like the Fight Club thing. When he first comes into dough, he's a wad of cookie dough, and by the end, he's like
Hmm.
hard as nails.
Yep.
And that's essentially the same kind of thing is where is the gap that we can help hunters not feel like they're on a regimented Olympic type training program, but what are the things that we can impart as far as wisdom and preparation that will help them prevent injuries, go a little bit further, maybe not be tired when the shot is in the crosshairs.
Hmm.
All of these things is really that's just a low brow mark of achievement that we're trying to find is like how can we help the hunting community be better hunters and not
Yeah.
just reside to them this idea that well you just have to be tough. Well, if you're going to be what's that saying, if you're going to be dumb you got to be tough.
Right.
Well, that's part of it. You don't have to be
Yeah.
tough when you're prepared. Your body is physically adapted for what you're asking, and I think myself, you, anybody can learn
Hmm.
from that and take from that. So
And that's
it's
kind of a
interesting.
good bridge point too to one of the other things that had come up that we wanted to talk about today, because we used the word preparedness a
Hmm.
bunch, and that was a question that had come up in the last couple of weeks, several times, was just this idea of preparedness as a big word, right? But there's all these different avenues and channels that have their own, essentially master's level course worth of stuff to talk
Yeah.
about. But if we're talking just general preparedness, whether that be in the physical sense with training and your fitness, or in the sense of your home or food or all of these other things that play a part, it was something that had come up, like what kind of things would you recommend people start with, or how do we go about, even if, like, as somebody totally green to this concept, what are maybe the couple of things that are a priority? And that can be super overwhelming,
Hmm.
because when you when you even dip a toe into this water, you realize that you're like jumping into the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's literally infinite amount of things that everybody will tell you you should be doing, you need to be
Mhm.
doing this, and it can be totally overwhelming to grasp that concept where you're like, well, what can I do right now? Like what's one thing
Mhm.
I can just do today to begin? Because it's one of these other things where it's going to compound and you'll just develop systems of all this. And if we relate it back to like the stuff from this weekend, like last year, we had a couple of different presentations and little group breakout things that were kind of surrounding this. Laura did a breakdown of like her med kit that she carries
Mhm.
with her in her bag, and then she did like a fire starting deal, which ended up being like the most perfect part of the day ever to do that, because as soon as we all went outside, it was torrential downpour.
Yeah.
And so she's like, you're not, if you can start a fire in this, like you can start one anywhere basically.
Yeah.
And so it was stuff like that that was really helpful. And then Pat did a bunch of like knot tying things. I mean, so there's all these like little niche things that are part of it. But when you think of preparedness, you know, in any direct, take it any direction you want. But like, what is maybe the one or two things that you look for as top priorities that you can maybe somebody implement soon with little to no formal training or experience?
Well, and first and foremost, I guess we could categorize these.
Mm-hmm.
Physical preparedness would be, for me individually, it would be some sort of training, some sort of cardio effect, some metabolic effect in my
Yeah.
training to elicit the response that I need for what I'm about to do. If I'm getting ready to do a 100-mile race,
Yeah.
getting paramountly strong is not going to be very conducive to that. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. Is a lot of these guys, Cam Hanes is a guy that's kind of ridiculed a lot for his approach. He doesn't train legs. He runs a half marathon every day. His legs don't need a whole lot more training than that.
Right.
So he trains and focuses on his upper body. Okay. Do I agree with that? Not necessarily for the average mountain person,
Right.
but for him it makes sense. And that's what we have to do now is we have to build the model that makes sense for me. So for me, strength training is going to be a part of that. Hiking is going to be a part of that. Rowing, shooting my bow. Those are going to be the physical. Brandon is prepared for this process type of
Yeah.
thing. Like, regardless of equipment, I can see myself from point A to point B on the finish line. Beyond that, I think one, I will say first and foremost, every outdoorsman should probably invest and start begin understanding the versatility of a knife,
Mm.
from cooking to splitting wood to shavings off of wood to start fire, from first aid applications, skinning. I mean, there's so many things that a good knife is just fundamentally paramount for. Um, I don't think that you will ever see an avid outdoorsman or a successful outdoorsman that doesn't at least tell you to rely on some type of blade. I know some guys have gone more to the hatchet mode.
Yep.
Some have gone more to something like the Speed Goat and Ultralight. This, I know you can see it, and I'll show it to those on the YouTube. But this has been my most popular carry knife
Mm.
since
Mm-hmm.
since I got it a few years ago. This is from Mike Vasquez. It's just a heavy duty. You can see it's a thick base. You can hit a mallet. You can hit a hammer on the back of it. You can split some firewood. You can shave with it. And I mean, shave like for whittling, for kindling.
Yep.
You can also shave your face with it. I've shaved my face with it a time or two. So something like this that has more than one approach. Whereas the
Yep.
Speed Goat, great knife, hyper functional, hyper light. You hit that over the thing in the back with a hammer or a mallet a few times, and you might not be looking at a full piece of Speed Goat. That's not a knock on Josh. That
Right.
is credit to their design that it was made for ultralight use and skinning.
Because he has ones that are made to handle
For
that
sure.
kind of
And
stuff
that's
too.
and that's the other thing is start
Yep.
educating you on the limitations of your equipment.
Yep.
Second, any avid outdoorsman beyond the knife, I would say your pack. Um, Understanding what your pack can do, what it's made for, and what its limitations are paramount. And also understanding that every pack that's made is not the same.
Mm.
Going to Walmart and buying a JanSport backpack is not going to be the same as a
Jansport,
technical
take me
or
back.
tactical backpack. A JanSport, that was my backpack from 8th grade through college. It carried my
Man.
books, it got me around. Good little backpack. And if that's all you can afford, and if you're just hiking and doing light outdoor stuff, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But getting into that segment of I might pack an animal out, or I might need a sleeping bag, or I might need
Right.
multi layers of gear. So understanding, addressing, and finding the right pack for you. A lot of reading, a lot of backgrounds there. Eberly Stock will be there. They'll have some kits. They can check you out. I actually run Kafaru bags,
Hmm.
just because experience in the field with a couple of those, they just did the job better
Yeah.
than I needed them to.
Yep.
And I'm just a very loyal person. I carried an Eberly stock backpack as an everyday carry for almost 4 years. Did the
Yeah.
job, was perfectly fine. Got into a field with kind of a heavier situation, and I was given a Kafaru pack to use on that hunt from one of the guys at Chino.
Hmm.
Packed out my elk perfectly. It was great. So can't really knock any one thing, but the back that I carried every day for 4 or 5 years that was so great would have been terrible for a hunt.
Right.
But the bag that I carried on my hunt would
Yep.
also work as an everyday carry.
Yep.
So it's knowing that kind of stuff. And then lastly, I guess third, and talking about somebody who wants to go full fledged into this, first aid would be.
Yeah.
Uh, it's hard because first aid and fire. You
Yeah.
know, either one of those two things, and I would actually put fire in first aid in some arguments, because
Hmm.
warmth
Yep.
is such a pivotal part of staying healthy and going strong in the outdoors. I mean, being cold is miserable. So I will loop that into first aid just from the standpoint
Sure.
of warmth. But moreover, I would just really dedicate to getting. I don't have it right here, but it's downstairs. I might post a picture of it. But I just got one of these little oversized tactical add-ons for your backpack, so it can
Yeah.
actually attach to your backpack. It's right on the outside. It's a quick release. You can pull it off. I keep various bandages, dressings. I keep some lidocaine in there just for instant pain release on a wound. Keep a stitch kit. Keep a tourniquet. Keep some Advil, Tylenol, some kind of pain reliever, inflammation
Hmm.
reducer. Keep a few water tabs in there so you can sterilize water. Also, something along the lines of betadine, peroxide. I mean, it's not a lot, but man, I've just had some really weird situations. I don't know if you can see my hand, but right
Hmm.
here, I tore a big gash out of my hand walking with my recurve.
Mm.
The springy rest was sticking out the other side and just gashed my hand.
Ooh.
So without those kind of things on hand, and they weren't, just left to bleed for a while. Eventually, we went and got them and got everything dressed out, and it's fine. But again, it's one of those times where I was like, don't need my first aid kit. Going right here. We're 25 minutes from the car.
Yep.
Not a big deal. Well, it could have been a lot worse in my hand, and it could have been a lot further than 25 minutes. So
Right.
even someone like myself who is confident and maybe even a little bit cocky at times by forgetting something like that,
Hmm.
I would not express to anyone that they should overlook their first aid kit, no matter the situation. And then fire starting, like you said, Laura teaching how to start a fire in the rain, understanding that cotton balls in a dip can that have been swabbed in Vaseline is the most
Hmm.
amazing fire starter backup in the world.
Hmm.
Knowing how to do it with a bow drill, knowing how to do it with a fire starter, an accelerant, or flint. I mean, you can literally, and we should talk about this more as we go. Like, we can individually break these down,
Yeah.
not again in the sense that you're an expert, I'm an expert. I'm an expert on my failures. I'm a
Right.
product of needing these things along
Yeah.
the way and wishing I'd had them. And after, several years of really trying to do this more and more, finding out and refining, because I used to be a guy that overpacked. Every time I went in the woods, I had a 60-pound pack because I wanted to cover any and all bases.
Right.
Well, that's good and it's bad. If it's 50 miles and you're 10 minutes from the car, no problem. If it's 50 pounds and you're going 7, 8 miles, it becomes a factor. So I am not a minimalist. I'm not one of these guys trying to live on 3 pounds,
Right.
but I can usually fill a pretty resourceful pack in under 20, and that's what I'm looking for now, is just that optimum pack size that is conducive to everything I need. And
Hmm.
some of my changes, or some of my things have changed too. Do I need a full rain gear, or do I
Yeah.
just need a micro water resistant blanket that I can put on if it's pouring? Stuff like that. And just having, it's time in the field. Like, you go to the same job every day for 1,000 days, you're going to be better at it and know more about it in a
Yeah.
thousand days. I've probably spent, in the last 5 to 6 years, near that 1,000 days in the outdoors.
Yep.
So it's not, like I said, I'm not better than anyone or no more than anyone. It's like I've just learned through being cold and being wet and
Yeah,
all that
well, and
stuff. So
a lot of these things, you can go in, like you said, you're going to go in with the idea the first time of what you need, and you're probably going to be wrong to either degree of not enough or too much.
mhm.
And so it only comes from that refining of being out and knowing what it is that you need, how you camp, how you hunt, all
Yeah.
these kind of things, where you do all of these things matters, right?
Yep.
And so like being up here in the Northwest where it's a lot of steep, if we're elk hunting, it's a lot of steep terrain at, close to maybe 10,000 feet or a little under that. Like
Yeah.
that's a lot different need than when you guys are pig hunting in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You know what I
For
mean?
sure.
Like you just need different stuff. And
Yep.
so that's part of knowing just, and that all comes from the experience part of it, where you have to go out and learn. I didn't do this right. Like, or and that's usually a bummer, but that just is part of it.
You
You
know,
get those things better.
you know who the worst in the world at that is the U.S. military, and I'll tell you. So I had a professor named Fate Brewer. He's just an awesome guy, super super. He was a Vietnam veteran, and
Okay.
he had fought on Hamburger Hill. Like he
Wow.
was like, I was a part of the group that advanced, took it. We retreated, or not retreated, but you kind of recede back, and they would take it again, and then they had to fight
Yep.
again. He said they
Yep.
took the hill like 4 times.
Oh my goodness.
And he said everyone was just a wave of slaughter, just watching his friends die. Like he had relegated himself to dying. But one of the things he talked about was, when we fought in Japan in World War II, um, we realized that it was like, it was warm and it was pleasant. So when we invaded, or we went to war with Korea, we sent Japanese issue.
Yeah.
Well, Korea was freaking freezing,
Yep.
and guys froze to death. And that's true. Like American soldiers froze to death in Korea because of ill prepared kit.
Yep.
Fast forward to Vietnam. Well, oh my God, we're fighting near Korea again, so we better send
Has to
cold
be the
weather gear.
same, right?
So they sent cold weather gear to the jungle again. Uh, Heat exhaustion, heat stroke, these kind of things started impacting our guys. They sent leather bottom boots to the jungle, so you were getting this rot foot, and the Viet Cong was using those bamboo shoots because softened leather made an easy target for those bamboo shoots to stab right through the foot,
Mm-hmm.
get infection and whatnot. And they were doing other shit too. They were dropping feces in the water and all kinds of stuff to make sure that if a soldier stepped on it, they were infected. Um, and that even carried over into the Middle East and in the Gulf War.
Yeah.
They sent them with more warm gear because of the cold nights than they did the cool gear. So the U.S. government, as an albatross, still doesn't do the preparation work to understand. They have all the gear in the world and all the kit in the world. They just pick the wrong ones
Mm.
until they get the feedback. So I know that's a terrible example, but it is true. Like
Yeah.
you are going to be ignorant if you've never done it. Just like our military, even though we've done it, we're making terrible assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we can learn from that. And that actually stuck a lot when I was talking to Fate. Was he was telling me, whatever you do in this life, make sure you know what you're getting into and how you're going to get back home.
Mm.
And like a lot of times people prepare for the climb up, they don't prepare for the climb down.
Yeah.
That's something I've talked about on Everest. You know where most people die that scale it?
On the way back down.
On the way back down,
Yeah.
because they chance their oxygen going up, they
Yep.
chance their rations going up, and now it's like, oh, this is the come down, it's easy. Well, they die coming down because they didn't prepare for the come down.
Yeah.
So I just think it's a lesson that we can talk about from our own experiences,
Yeah.
but also just impart some anecdotal evidence towards other things too.
Yeah, and I'll build off of kind of a couple of the things that you had said because I'd been asked specifically gear wise what kind of stuff I like. You mentioned Kafaru
Mm-hmm.
on the packs, and I've been using EXO for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
last couple of years, and they're local here.
they're
Made,
amazing too.
they're made here in Boise area, and they're awesome, and they're heavy duty
Yep.
and honestly, until you use, and this is more related to the mountaineering, the hunting issue, right? But until you use a really good pack, like when you use one for the very first time, it's one of those moments where like, how in the world was I ever doing anything other than this? Like
Right.
it's such a difference maker in your ability to carry load if you
Yeah.
use one that's properly fitted and has a good frame and it's got everything that you need. Like it's crazy. So in terms of things that are, I would say, an important investment, they can be expensive, right? I mean, they're several
Mm-hmm.
$100s for a nice one, but you get one, they'll last you. If you get a good one like Kufaru and EXO, will last years. Like,
Yeah.
depending on how ragged you run with them, but even that, they hold up really well. And so I agree. Like the backpack thing was incredibly important. I'll take it a little bit of a different direction because one of the other versions of this that we can talk about with preparedness is if we bring it back like into the home front, right? Because
Sure.
that's a big I mean, a massive thing as well, how to prepare your home for whatever, if it becomes power outage, if it becomes, and there was all these with this whole last week, people talking about the threat of a high altitude EMP because of that stupid Chinese balloon that flew all the way across the country before anybody did anything about it.
Yeah.
And I made a joke that because they were passing it off as like, oh, it was just a weather balloon, right? That was what the Chinese government was saying. And I made the joke that like they're probably just checking on all the farmland in the country that they already own. So like,
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
everybody, what is everybody ticked off
Yeah.
about, But if we're talking about like home defense, a couple of things, and this is something that I'm still learning, right? Like we're doing what we can here because we're also in the process of maybe looking at moving into a new place this year with
Oh
it has
shit.
some, yeah.
Nice.
So that's a whole thing. And taking some of these things where I have a criteria or like a list of priorities on new locations, right? But the first thing I'd probably say is the water route. Like as
Mm.
far as things that are easy for people to do, you can
Hmm.
always start a backup supply of water. And like the general kind of recommendation is that gallon per person per day uh in the home. And then the general recommendation is like a 2 week supply,
Yeah.
right? So that doesn't mean you have to go out and fill up 500 gallons of water and then find somewhere to store it right away. But you can take a couple of 5 gallon things and get them filled up with clean drinking water and find a cool, dark place to store them, whether it be in your garage or a basement or whatever. And do that like a couple times a week or something like that. Every time you go to the grocery store, take one extra one. Right.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes in the same vein with the food preparation. If you get like shelf stable stuff, you don't need to like go out and make a run just for the things that are going to be in your like survival kit, right? Or you're
Yeah.
on all your shelves. But like if you're going to go get a bunch of rice, get a pound extra of rice. It's like a
Hmm.
$1.50 if you go to like a bulk foods thing, right?
Yeah.
Take that and put it in a storage thing and put it downstairs or whatever it is. And you can slowly begin to build these things up by adding to already existing grocery runs
Yep.
rather than like, well, I'm not going to go spend $500 on emergency food this week. Well, you don't have to. You can spend
Yeah.
an extra 10 and get a good amount of stuff and then do it again next week and next week. And then pretty soon, a couple months in, you've got a full shelf full of stuff that like you've
Yeah.
already built up into the rotation.
Well, I'll tell you something else that's really effective and kind of a movement here in my town. So, college I go to has always somewhat been invested in a sustainable community,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily sustainable living for an individual, but a sustainable community to the point that there's a giving farm in town, and what they
Okay.
do is if you go there and work it and you plant some stuff, you're allowed to take things out of it. I mean, within reason. Like
Yep.
you're not getting a year's worth of corn from it, but you might be able to take a few bushels or a few ears of corn and feed
Yeah.
your family with it. Like so, it's teaching people the process, but they had a really big initiative about collecting rainwater,
Mm.
getting a 55-gallon barrel, running it off your gutters, and having a filtration system in there. And actually, believe it or not, if you just filter with some rocks and some sand and different various things that you actually set on top through the feeder,
Yeah.
it will become purified filtered water with all the enriched minerals that you actually need, not this like vacated liquid source. It's like it's
Right.
actually valuable water,
Yep.
because that's a lot of times people don't understand that we're drinking this, purified water or whatever. They're becoming more dehydrated because they're not actually taking in the mineral content to keep them
Yeah,
balanced. So
for sure.
rainwater is a great one. 55-gallon barrel drum. Hell, get wild and get two of them and run them on the house, and now you've got 110 gallons. I also agree with the buying the 2 to 3 5-gallon water jugs. They're not very expensive. They're exchangeable. If you go too long looking at them, just run it through and get a new one,
Yep.
refill it.
Yep.
I think something like that, having 15 to 20 mobile gallons at all
Yep.
times is good. And I've gone so far, tipping my hand a little bit, but I sourced a place around here that has fresh spring water. Like it's
Nice.
drinkable water.
Yep.
And I have systematically buried 3 of those big Rubbermaids throughout time. It really started with COVID. It was something I'd really
Yep.
wanted to do, but it started with COVID. And like you said, bags of rice, ramen noodles, just some dense calorie type
Mm-hmm.
foods that are also, you can cut a pack of ramen in half, or you can ration out rice if things got really bad. You don't want these big block items that you have to consume whole. That's why I kind of avoided even some of the canned foods,
Yeah.
because then once the can's open, you're kind of committed to it.
Yep.
And granted, if it was a kind of live or die situation, that can's probably not going to last very long anyway. But
Right.
in the sense of having rationable goods, having some rope, having some matches, having some, an additional first aid kit for those things,
Yeah.
having a tent buried there in case I don't have access to a tent. So I've got these three big Rubbermaids with batteries, with flashlights, with lanterns, with some fuel, for the lanterns kind of thing.
Yep.
So all of this stuff on its own, you could go there and you could have a place. You're not necessarily going to be able to stay there forever,
Sure.
but packing your home, like you said, with those additional groceries, if you could come back, or having the 100 gallons of water out here that you could come back to.
Yep.
Um, I don't know the situation where it would be so dire that you would just be entirely without.
Right.
But I think also having a bug out spot
Hmm.
like I'm talking about, I mean, I know exactly where it is. I can walk there with my eyes closed. It's far enough that nobody else is going to find me or it. And it's close enough that I can get there every day if I wanted to. So again, is that some sort of hysteria? No, I don't think it is. And just on the fact that I think that the political scheme of the world and just the world at large is somewhat volatile right now.
Yep.
I don't see it. Preparation is not paranoia.
Right.
Preparation is preparation for the potential of what could be. And like I said, I'm not building an entire structure out there waiting for this to happen. It's
Right.
just these are some necessities that I will sure as hell wish I had, or wish I had done something to prepare for if shit ever hits the fan. I hope not.
Yep.
I hope those things rot. I hope
Yeah.
somebody
Right.
finds them in 50
Exactly.
years. But as far as the house, I am pretty aggressively armed. I like knives a lot, and I keep a knife pretty much on me at all times. Not so much from the boogeyman, but just I like to have it around for different things.
Yeah.
But as far as my anti-home defense, first line of defense for me is going to be a shotgun with alternate slugs and buckshot. It's
Mm.
going to go slug buck, because if somebody's coming at me, I want to hit them with the slug first,
Yeah.
and then some buckshot if they're running, and then another
Hmm.
slug, and so on and so forth. So first line of defense would be a tactical Mossberg 500. I've got it tricked out with a flashlight, collapsible stock, different things. It holds 8 rounds as is. So,
Yeah.
I'm not going to miss something 8 times, especially in close quarters. And
Right.
the best defense I can tell anyone that has an arm, firearm, that doesn't want to be the aggressor, go to your furthest closet, lock the door, and point that thing at the handle. And if somebody starts jarring it, make them identify themselves. And if not, blow the handle off the door.
Yep.
Like, that's the best thing. If you don't want to go actively through your house, get as far away from their potential reach. And if they're coming for you, they're not coming to say hi.
Right.
You know, that's kind of the training model that I use. Beyond that, I keep a pistol by my bed that I always it would go straight on my hip. Shotgun would go in my hand,
Yep.
and then throughout the house, there's a couple other ARs and some things like that.
Yep.
But you know, is it over preparation? I don't know. Do I shoot
Yeah.
those guns regularly? Yes. So it's like they're just storage places for my guns, and a bad day for somebody that comes in here unwanted.
Yeah,
So,
it's cool because we have, I don't know if you can see that shelf behind me up there
hmm
that's right next to the guitars. It's actually a false bottom shelf that has
oh
like a
yeah,
RFID chip thing on the top, and I have it's like you can literally I did it to where it makes it look like some kind of like trapdoor James Bond looking thing because I can slide
yeah,
something over and the bottom drops out of it, and I got both of our handguns, my wife's and mine,
yep,
right under there. She has a P365, and then my
yep. That's a
G17.
great gun. I had one of
Yeah,
those for quite a while.
and that's what I usually like to just do everyday carry with,
Hmm.
just size, and it shoots well. But the G17 is the one that is like more so home, and then if I got a spot between my seat where I keep it
Yeah.
in the rig. Um, but I was thinking as you were talking about, like, as far if we're talking about the arms part of this, one of the things actually from Winter Strong last year that really stuck with me was when we were out doing the stuff with Buck,
Hmm.
and he was probably one of my favorite people of the entire
Yeah.
weekend, by the way.
Bakhtiari.
Oh my
Yep.
gosh, he's the best. And but one of the things he had said was, he's like, I understand the
Excuse
want
me.
and the desire and the need for people to go out and buy, uh be kind of this, like, home version of an arms dealer, right,
Yeah.
where they have dozens or whatever of all these things, and tens of thousands, and ammo's great, obviously that's not the point I'm trying to make, but he's like, but they've only shot every gun they have one time,
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
some of them maybe haven't even shot one of their before I have so many, right? He's like,
Yep.
it's like the old Bruce Lee thing. I'm much more effective shooting one gun 10,000 times
Yeah.
than 30 guns, without varying consistency. And
Hmm.
so and I think about it just because of the home that we live in, where it's a smaller home, like under 800 square feet for the whole
Yeah.
place. Storage is an issue, right? We don't have like a massive place to put like a gun. I have our places that we have things. So I'm thinking like, how effective can I be with two or three at most? Like I've got our shotgun, I got our handguns, and going to be getting the AR platform sometime this year. So that'll be kind of like round out,
Yeah.
uh, right? So like that's the other part of this is you can listen to everybody that has these magic, like Logan, right? Who has a
Yeah.
room that's just an arsenal, right?
Yep.
And but he has a 600-acre farm, right? Like
Yeah.
and all these outbuildings and all these other things with his home that, and everything else that is conducive for him having that sort of armory, where like
Yep.
you have to look at it in what is your situation, what is going to be the most effective, and then the other part of this that seems obvious when you and I are talking about it, but you have to practice with them,
Yeah.
right, and train with them, and not only just being a proficient marksman, but situationally, like you had given the example of if somebody's coming and you got to get to the as farthest away as they can be from you in the home, like run yourself through different scenarios. I did about 2.5 years of that type of training at a local place here that was owned and operated by a couple of ex law enforcement guys, and then they had a couple of ex military guys that worked for them, while teaching just situational
Hmm.
stuff. And they had this big warehouse that had like these fake, like a fake bank and like a
Yeah.
fake home, and they'd run you through like, and we do like the gel cap version of ammo, so you
Hmm.
could actually use a full size G17 as
Yep.
practice. But they teach you like, if you're in this situation, here's how you look around a room. Like
Hmm.
here's the points to look at first, depending on where you are in the room. If you're going through your home, here are the things to make sure you look for. And so if there's anybody that's in your area that offers that type of training, I mean, that kind of stuff, I mean, can really kind of be invaluable for talking about learning how to, potentially save lives or save your own life.
Right. Well, jujitsu as well. I mean, it's
Yeah.
one of those things that can really kind of surprise you because you think, okay, I'm strong, I'm fit, I'm a man, and then you wrestle
Yeah.
with a female, maybe 50, 60, 70 pounds you're lighter,
Hmm.
but they're more technical. So to give you an example, I have a lot of friends that have been in the special forces group,
Hmm.
um, and just some different situations have presented themselves. I've worked with Brian Morgan out at Hat Creek Training in Idaho, some long range stuff, but some of the close quarter stuff really surprised me. So just to give you an example of the average person, maybe say the average man that thinks, okay, I'm going to outmaneuver this situation, right? So we're setting up, and the whole scenario was you were supposed to be doing something active, whether it was working on your computer, working on your phone, cooking dinner. You were just given a task and you were supposed to do it. And within 5 minutes, you knew somebody was coming and they were going to come in and attack you.
Mm.
So this was a situation where, I'd watched a couple other guys go and they'd always entered through this leftward door. So what do? I'm sitting here on the phone and I'm going through my 5 minutes and I'm just waiting, looking at this door. Dude walks up behind me and puts a knife to my neck and was just like, "You're done." And I was like, "But I thought yeah." He's like, "You thought
Mm.
wrong."
Yeah.
So it was teaching you that even when you think
Yeah.
it is the situational awareness of everything. Okay, everybody's been coming through that door. There's still windows, there's still a door, there's still other entryways over here. And I think a lot of times just having that ultra fixation on that's the front door, that's where they're going to come through if they're coming, you start to omit possibilities from other areas. And lo and behold, even on the next round, when he came through the appropriate door, I had to put the phone down. I had to get into my shirt and lift up and draw my, simulated weapon. He was already on top of me, like literally preventing me from drawing my weapon.
Yep.
So having some understanding of one, get away from the threat and then dispose of the threat. Like I stayed still. The move should have been, okay, there's trouble coming. what does an animal do in the wild? It runs before it even asks questions.
Yep.
So get away and then address your weapon and address the attacker or whatever it may be. But just little stuff like that. And even again, live situation pops out right now. I'm not going to know the right answer. You're going to
Yeah.
have to, but time is the one thing they kept promoting was give yourself more time. If I'm at a table and somebody's coming in, spin the table between you,
Yep.
create distance, and then create that time. I mean, just stuff like that that you can't know unless you're going through some of these classes. Buds up in Lexington, they're at gun range. They run all kinds of self defense.
Hmm.
I encourage everyone to get their carry conceal license, just especially as a voice and a vote towards giving
Yeah.
a shit about guns in a country that's trying to take them away.
Yeah.
Um, it's just one more piece that can say, I care about guns. I believe in my right to exercise gun ownership. And
Yeah.
it bodes well for gun ownership if more people are getting licensed and going through those steps. But there are things you learn in those courses. But I agree with you. I could not, especially in this day and age, money's hard, interest rates are up, people are losing their jobs. That is just a breeding ground for petty crime,
Yeah.
and petty crimes become violent crimes when they're interrupted.
Yeah.
So it's not paranoia again to be prepared. $300 $400 for a good weekend course is not out of the question. $1,000 $1,500 for a more in-depth kind of course is not out of the question. I bet you would spend that $1,000 every single time if someone broke into your home and you were unable to prevent the harm
Yeah.
of your child, your spouse, yourself. How valuable would that $1,000 have been then? Might not
Yeah.
have saved you, but
Yeah.
it might be the difference in saving you at some point, you know?
And we said, there's all places, there's probably some, depending on where you are, I guess, there's the likelihood that there's somewhere relatively close that does something like this to your location. But
Hmm.
there's also a bunch of, like, I know Ian Strimbeck from Rune Nation
Yep.
he travels around the country and does this kind of stuff. So I mean, like,
Well,
there's
like Rudy and
resources
Jade,
out, and exactly, and there's
there's tons
resources
of
out
people out
there
there.
that you can search and find and look for specifically what type of training you're wanting. A lot of them are firearms, some of them are survival based, some of them are med kit based, these kinds of things. One of the things I was going to ask you when you brought up jujitsu, because this is sort of this, it's sort of this like internal struggle I have with it, because what I think happens is some people get proficient in jujitsu, or like proficient enough to where they feel more confident defending themselves, and then they think out in the streets, like, if someone steps up to them to start something, they want to get into that confrontation, because almost to kind of like prove, like, look, I know how to do this now.
Yeah.
But when you're out in that kind of scenario, there's no there's no judge or ref like awarding points and stuff, and you have no idea the situation, like, if you're just gonna like try and get something out of a bar fight, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're probably past the point in our society where, like, the bar fight used to just be a couple dudes who throw a couple punches and one of them get thrown out, and then everybody's fine, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're to the point where, like, guys are carrying knives or
Hmm.
stuff like this, and they don't want to lose, right? So,
Well,
and you're out in the street, you have no idea. So, like what you said, create that distance, right?
hmm.
Like, that should be like, do that first and assess. And, like, if you need to piece, I can't tell you how many stupid videos I've seen that I wish I hadn't seen, of guys that are getting into a situation like this, and one guy that they're going against turns into four,
Yeah.
right? All of a
Well,
sudden.
I think it was even Rogan that said, what would you do in a fight? And he said the first thing I tell everybody is run.
Mhm.
Like you don't know what's coming
Yeah,
later on. And my instructor Scott, he actually said one time he would love to fight a guy in the street that just stuck to jujitsu. He said it hit him
exactly.
in the face like 5 or 6 times and it's over. So you can, maybe in that sense, you can overtrain to the point where you defer so strictly to a rule set that you
Yes.
forget that this is a street fight. This is different.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it does bode well to have some kind of martial art training, but also you got to have a little bit of that cowboy in you that's like,
Mhm.
I know these things and I'm going to use these things, but if this thing gets sideways, I'm biting nuts, I'm poking eyes, I'm whatever I can do, I am going to be the aggressor in
Yeah.
this situation. Or maybe the best answer is I'm going to run like hell
Yeah.
until, if they're coming after me, at least I have some time to think of I don't know, but I mean, somebody with bad intentions, that's a bad day.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly. And that
I don't,
that the part about running, I think, because you brought up like the conditioning part earlier, right? And that was one of the things I wanted to make a point of too, as we're talking about this preparedness thing, because it's kind of become a meme of itself, of these guys that are kind of the wannabe like special forces guys that, like
yeah,
carry all these kits and have the plate carriers and the night visions and all that kind of stuff, but they can't run a mile.
yeah,
Like none of that's going to do you any good without
yeah.
some form of conditioning, and I mean a million other things, but like there's this, that's why we're talking, this whole conversation is like, what's that hierarchy, right?
Yeah, I think it's very true. I was actually watching a guy the other day. He's a single action shooter, kind of a heavy set guy, and he was working the Henry repeater,
Oh,
and
I
then he
saw
was
that
on his
video.
he was yeah, you so know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like this guy would mow your ass down if you're coming.
Right.
If he got in a pursuit of any kind where he was on foot, I mean, can he shoot that good backwards?
Right.
Because he's not going to make it very far running away.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes into a deeper thing with me is I think we've gotten to a point in life where this meat wagon, this meat vehicle is like almost, I think people are viewing in stereo. Like
Yeah.
this is my life through my eyes. You're in my life. This isn't your life. It's mine. So I'm viewing everything outward. And I think that a lot of times we forget that if we were better versions of that meat wagon, if we had better physical health, we might have better gut health, which might mean better mental health, which might mean better
Yeah.
thought processing, better physical processing. I think that life, to be lived at its ultimate, has to be experienced through a body that is at its ultimate. And I don't think
Mm.
that everybody is going to be, an Olympic athlete or, super in shape. I think that there's a fundamental line of what I would consider fitness that will be a precursor to a better life. Can you walk? Can you jog a little bit? Can you lift weights? And it doesn't have to be any of those things. I know yogis that are in incredible physical condition, but they're also pushing very hard at their thing.
Yeah.
Um, I just feel like a better version of you is going to be a better fire starter, a better
Yep.
tent maker, a better gun shooter, a better bow shooter. All of those things are extensions of the individual that you create.
Mm.
And whether that is reading more so you have mental comprehension. Dude, I was thinking about this too. I mean, the amount of, like, if somebody said you have to read 10 pages to get a job and you have to read these 10 pages and comprehend them, how many people are getting bored at page 3 or page 2?
Mm-hmm.
I had a situation where I was showing a video the other day and it was like, are they going to get to the point? Well, it's like a 90-second video and it
Right.
takes 80 seconds to build the build up to making the point.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it's 90 seconds. Like I ask you to watch it. It's 90 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, but that's sometimes where our attention spans are, is they're just so condensed that we want the hit and then we want to move on. We don't care to go further. So I think if you're that type of person, definitely do not buy a firearm because you won't shoot it.
Right.
You will just look at it pretty in its box. Don't buy a bow, you won't shoot it.
Yep.
Don't go hunting, you won't win. Like you won't succeed at the things
Mm-hmm.
that you're trying to win at in life until you can manage and control and contort your body into the specimen that it should be. That sounds so asinine and so simple to me, but it's literally something that people struggle with
Yeah.
tremendously. I have struggled with it tremendously, but sitting here right now, I'm doing pretty good with it.
Yeah.
But I think the best preparation tool that you can have is yourself.
Mm.
Make yourself capable on every front. Be able to walk further, run further, learn a martial art, learn to read, maybe even help start learning a different language. All of these things are ways to better navigate a future in this world. Like, should we learn Spanish? Should we learn Chinese? I don't know, but one or the other is going to be better than neither.
Right.
You know, so that kind of thing, and that is the luxury of being a little bit older, because when you're young, you're so stupid, you just do everything. But now it's kind of like, well, I don't necessarily need to be a shit ton stronger. So
Right.
my training, like how many guys are going to overpower me in this life? Not very many.
Right.
How many are going to outlast me in a physical confrontation? How many are going to be better fighters in a physical confrontation? Or how many people are going to, And it sounds like I'm so paranoid about these things. And it's not like I sit around and just think about it, think about it, think about it.
Yeah.
But it's an active process. It's an active daily process. Did I get better? Am I still capable with my bow? Am I still capable with my rifle? Am I still capable with my pistol? It's not like I'm going to the range every single day. I do with my bow, but with a gun, shooting every single day. Once a week, once every couple weeks, even once a month, depending on the amount of time dedicated to it, you can stay pretty sharp.
Yeah.
Um, but I
Or even
think
dry firing if you don't want to waste
dry
ammo.
firing is the best thing in the world. I
Exactly.
literally think that there's it's free. Like
Yep.
you slide your rack back, point and aim, click, and it's a training tool beyond perceiving the bang.
Yep.
That's something they talk about a lot is like anticipating that
Mm-hmm.
noise. That is a huge component of misaligned accuracy is people like flinching and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So training that way, I mean, we do need to do more of this, and we need to maybe even have some people on that are way better at it than us.
Yeah.
But I think if I had one recommendation for a person, get a good, solid, uh, non-collapsing knife, a fixed blade knife. Find a pistol that you really believe in. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
Glock guy. I've
Mm-hmm.
trusted SIGs. I've had some FNN. I've had some CZs. Like I've had a wide range of guns. The most dependable, most accessorizing and customizable probably is the Glock. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just a universally sound platform. Can fire underwater. Can take a beating. And you're $500, $600 away from home protection.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really it. Like if you have a pistol and a knife, I mean, that's a pretty good start. For
Yeah.
me, it's just on a preparation standpoint. That's where I would start. A good physical body, pistol,
Mm-hmm.
knife.
And to go with, excuse me, one of the things that I was thinking of because I looked to my right here, I've got a handful of like my kind of my current books and things that I map out for the next handful of months. Keep them all right here, and then I've got a bunch strewn about wherever. Um, but there are physical books, right? Like I would always encourage you to get some like literal physical books that have lessons on these skills. There are some, I mean, just so you have like if for whatever reason you can't access that information online or digitally anymore, you need that physical thing. So like the one of the more popular ones is I think it's Bushcraft 101.
Yeah, that's what I've got
And
that book right over here.
yep, and I've got it right down here. And he's got several in that series that are like a little more fine tuned. And Ranella has like a wilderness survival guide he came out with. I mean, like there's all kinds of those where even if all you did was just go buy that book, there are skills in there that you could learn from reading those pages that you could go out and practice just at your home. It
Yeah,
doesn't have to be some big grand, I have to go out in the mountains and test myself for 3 days. Like just take a knife and practice on a stick how you're going to shave the kindling for starting a fire. Like, I mean, learn these things on those pages, and then you always have that book, right? Because who knows? We someday we might not be able to access a lot of this stuff digitally if accounts get shut down or websites get taken off at the rate that they're being purged in some places right now. But if you've got a book in your home, like I would prefer that, especially if it's something that's teaching those skills, right?
yeah. Well, I'm just looking at my kind of myriad of books over here.
Yeah.
Just in the grasp, I've got some books on poetry. I've got a couple Bibles.
Mm-hmm.
I've got the classics. Um, and then it starts into some of the
Yeah, yeah, I got it
I
right here.
wouldn't even say self-help stuff necessarily, but just more like anecdotal stories from people that have overcome some shit. But yeah, I've got 101 skills to learn before you die, Bushcraft 101.
Yeah, right here. Got that one.
Yeah,
Dave
I've got
Canterbury is the
yep.
author of that one for those listening.
But there's 7 or 8 books I'm looking at right now, from the Meat Eater cookbook to a
Yep.
Bourdain cookbook, a knife making book.
Yep.
I mean, and it's not to say that these are the exact books to go out and buy, but I think it's more of a detailed examination of, you know, I, it, I'm pretty proud of my books in the sense that there's a lot of like enlightenment from an education standpoint, and there's also enlightenment from a physical standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just try to run the gamut of all of it.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I'm interested in this, but it's also like there's so many fucking LARPers out there that act like there's something that they're not.
Yeah.
Dude, this is an enthusiasm for me.
Yeah.
This is a hobby for me based on people that I admire and look up to and lives that I want to live. I mean, one of the newest books that I have, it's not new at all. It's actually from 1914, I think, but it's
I love those.
Theodore Roosevelt's hunting book. It was actually came from a library in Idaho.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, but some of his stories and the hardships, it's like
Hmm.
it makes you realize how far we've come and how much easier things are.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. I want to see people get excited about ownership of their lives. Being able to confront the things that challenge them, overcome the things that challenge them, and then also
Hmm.
create new challenges that make them better.
Yeah.
That's something that we haven't said exactly, but I think it's been something that we've rooted for when we started this whole thing. Was
Hmm.
we're both trying to figure it out. Like we're just trying to figure this thing out and shed some light on those things. Um, do you think that do you think that some people, and I guess you already said they did, but do you think some people live this life where they think they have it figured out, and
Hmm.
maybe they do as a list of check boxes versus actually being able to do the things that they talk about? I mean, does that just in your mind strictly come down to practice, or does that come down to ego somewhat too?
I think it's a little both because I think some people view it as such I use the example with like the gun guys before, right? And uh, they will actually go out and buy all the kit they think they need, and and then do like the air rifle competitions, or like the whatever it's called, the airsoft
Yeah,
like
yeah,
games, right? And go, I mean, then there's like benefit to learning how to like move and that kind of thing within a building with some of that stuff. But what I think a lot of people do is like they consume so much on a topic that the consumption leads to the belief that they are the expert
yeah,
without the practical application of it.
yeah,
Like I can read 10 different books on how to raise chickens,
yeah.
right? But until I actually have a couple of birds in my yard and know how it is to like to raise chickens, I can't speak to anything about any of that, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, when I was younger, I was telling you we didn't have a whole lot of extra money. So my dad, bless his like, and I hate saying bless his heart because it kind of sounds like you pity on him, but
Mm,
he was trying to do right by me in that he knew I wanted to take karate. I was big into like Karate Kid and
hmm.
some of the Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee films, so I was very into it. Couldn't afford lessons, and he took me to the library and we got this like karate book, picture book,
Yeah.
and it was like showing how to demonstrate these things. And I swear to God, I spent days I had 2 weeks with that book. So for 2 weeks,
Right.
every photograph I was mimicking and all this other stuff, man, it did not make me a martial artist. It did not
Right.
actually make me any closer to being a martial artist. It just showed me some of the poses. And that's essentially what you're talking about is you can have a good faith effort and I
Yeah.
can read about all this stuff. It will never ever be the same until you try it,
Hmm.
until you do it and fail and do it and fail and refine your own process. But man, I just think it's important. I think for me, there's so many things I can't control in this life. There's so many things that are unknown in this life, so many unexpected turns in the last 2 or 3 years. I think for me, this is anti-anxiety
Mm,
exercise. Um, and really anything that brings you closer to closure on a topic is anti-anxiety exercise. As far as if you got to pay a bill, well, if you just sit here and fret about it, you're never going to pay that bill. But if you're going out and you're like, I'm just going to do odd jobs till I get enough money, you're reducing that anxiety because,
yeah.
okay, I'm $100 closer, I'm $50 closer, I'm $75 closer. Same kind of thing in this front. Like, I'm not going to go outshoot Brian Morgan. I'm not going to outshoot Michael Baccaliari. I'm not going to outshoot Colby for Volkortson, but I can go out here and improve myself and get better and better and better. And that will tell me, okay, I got better. That limits this previous anxiety of not being good enough.
Hmm.
And that's on all fronts. I mean, I'm not saying anything revolutionary, but
Right.
it is just a good reminder that information does not equal skill set. Skill
Yes.
set is applied information and application and then readaptation, I think, something like that.
Forever. Like there's
Forever.
never, and there's never, even the guys that we would look to as the masters, right? They're still doing the same thing of refining the skill. And I think that becomes, I mean, that's the Dunning Kruger, right?
Yeah.
Like you get to that point where you realize, yeah, I'm probably the most knowledgeable, but I don't really believe that that's enough still, you know?
Well, I'll tell you one cool story. So I asked a guy, he's he's a very high level special forces guy. And I asked him one
Hmm.
time, I said, dude, what's your ADC? And he goes, it's going to surprise you. And I was like, all right, what is it? And he just reaches in his pocket and pulled out a ninja star. He was like, I either figure that if I pull that out on somebody, they're going to assume that I am such a badass, that's all I need, or I get to kill a guy with it. So either way, it's pretty cool.
I'm
So,
trying to think of like, yeah, that would mess my mind up if I got into something and a dude
dude, if
pulls
you
out a
saw a dude
ninja
pull
star.
out 3 ninja stars and like fan them,
Like, I'm sorry, never mind. I'm
I would,
done.
that'd be almost worth going out like that.
Right.
Getting hit in the like the arterial, like the femoral of your leg. Like, damn it, hit me in the artery.
Oh, that's funny, man. I think we could probably turn this into a series because we didn't even touch on really, I mean, just at the very end, kind of even like the homestead model, right? Where you're
Yeah,
talking about raising your own food or, any kind of, small livestock. And you mentioned water, like rainwater collect. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we could branch this off into. So maybe we do maybe another, and like you said, I bet we could bring some people on that are much more knowledgeable.
well, Kevin Estelle is a good friend of mine. I mean, well, I'll say
Yeah,
good
he's
friend. Like, he's a good dude, and we've
yep,
known each other a little while. It's not like we talk every day, but he would
right.
definitely be a guy that would be down for it.
Yeah.
Even Buck, I'm sure Buck would be on for
Yeah.
some gun stuff.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's so many people that are so much more qualified than us. I
Right.
think having the banter of their qualification versus our mistakes,
Yeah.
it might make for some good information.
Right, exactly.
But
So,
yeah, dude, I appreciated this episode, and
mhm.
it kind of makes me go back and look at my own list. You know, like,
Yeah,
do I need
same.
to check back on some things, or do I need to do things different? So it's always good to refresh.
Well, we'll do some more of these because this got me, like you said, yeah, got my wheels turning on some stuff that I want to still have some time to go more in depth on. So we'll have to make it probably do this a couple of different times in some form or fashion on different topics with as it relates to survival and prep and all this kind of stuff. But
Yeah,
we'll call it there for today. And this will be posted normal day if you guys are watching on YouTube on Friday, but we'll be down off the grid for the most part by then, man. So we'll get after it, and I'll